What's going on, adventurers? We are live doing a little bit of a different take of an episode of Adventure Talk Live tonight. Hopefully you can all hear me. I know right now a lot of people are social distancing or self-quarantining or whatever you want to call it. A lot of people are out there. Maybe you plan to do something this weekend and now you're not. And you're trying to just be isolated, be courteous, all that. So I thought it'd be interesting to use the power of the internet, use the ability to live stream, and just kind of do a little bit of a different episode today. So normally when I do these, it is just me chatting with a guest. Sometimes it's hunting buddies who I've hunted with numerous times. Sometimes it's new folks who I don't know too well, but people who have an interesting story or an interesting realm of expertise. Today, I'm going to do it a little bit differently, and I just wanted it to be a little bit more open, a little bit more freeform. And if this kind of works out and you guys like it, maybe I'll do more of these. So I wanted to just open it up to kind of user-submitted questions. So I posted on my Facebook, didn't get a ton of response, but I also messaged some of my friends saying, hey, just send me some questions, topics, ideas, whatever, about things that are interesting to discuss in camping, hunting, hiking, everything outdoors adventure related. So I got a whole bunch of questions, more than I can probably fit into this. So I don't really know how long this live stream is going to be. Probably not super long, but depending on the content, if I start getting more questions, it may go longer. So we will just see. So the first question I got that I wanted to address that I think is a really good one, this was from Natalie. She says, what to look for in a good campsite? So that's a great question. So at first I would whenever you're looking for what is a good campsite, you have to look at what type of camping are you doing. Are you just truck camping? Are you backpacking? Or are we looking for something that's just good for kind of anything and everything else? So with that kind of supposition, I would say in general, first look for a flat spot. If you're trying to find a place to hang your hammock or set up a tent, I guess for a hammock it doesn't really matter. What am I talking about? But if you're looking for a place to set up a tent, it needs to be flat. And another good thing about a flat spot is if there's a rainstorm, you won't have crazy runoff just gushing by you. Yeah, it might hold water, so you probably want to avoid that. So typically a spot that's not a low spot, so don't camp like right at the very bottom of a hill, and look for a flat spot. If it's rocky terrain or hilly terrain, I would say look for a flat spot that's kind of somewhere up on the slope. So a place that's got a big enough flat area for you to set your tent. If you're backpacking and you're going to hang a bear bag, look for a place where you can hang a bear bag downwind of you. Probably about, some people say 100 yards, like that's the publicized rule. I think, that may be a little bit much, but just a place where you can hang a bear bag a little bit away from you, and a place where you can kind of cook and clean that's not right by your tent. So space it out a little bit. A lot of people get too congested, kind of combine everything together. You don't necessarily need all that right on top of each other on a campsite. You're out in nature. You're in the great outdoors. Spread it out a little bit. In terms of tree cover, if it's camp, do I camp, way out in the open, or do I go kind of back in the woods? Do I set up right on the edge? It kind of depends on surroundings. If you're back in the woods, just watch out for widowmakers, dead trees that are prone to fall. You do not want to be under or near those. If you're out in the open, you're probably more likely to be subject to high winds or rain or lightning. So I would say camp in the woods, but maybe not under huge old trees. So kind of in that kind of intermediate transition area. I think that's always good. So those are some good options for picking out a good campsite. And also when you pick out a campsite, make sure it's just got enough room for everybody in your crew. If you're solo camping, that's pretty easy. If you're going with a big group of people, again, space it out a bit. And If you need to dig trenches or anything like that to improve the drainage, some people are really hardcore on the leave no trace stuff, and I'm not. I think you should generally do the best you can. It's better to not dig trenches and not mess up the terrain if you can avoid it. But if it makes sense in your situation, go for it. Just make sure it's something that you're not totally destructive, that you can fill back in later. So hopefully those are some interesting tips for picking out a good campsite. Next question is, when hiking, are there any good ways to step or walk in steep inclines? And so I think this question is literally about how are you putting your feet down? And I've had buddies make fun of the way I walk a little bit because I guess, what is it? Supinate? I think pronate is in, supinate is out. I do that. Not pigeon-toed, the other one. So I do that a lot, and not intentional. It's just the way I walk. And I think kind of the way I walk, the reason I walk that way is it does kind of help me get a little bit more traction. It's almost like the big lugs on a mud tire or something, I guess. But I think that's more just the way I walk rather than a recommendation. I would say in general, flat ground, bigger steps. Find a comfortable stride. And remember, each step you're burning energy, and you're trying to make each step count so that you can get as far as you can with each step. But when you're going up and down a slope, I don't think that works the same way. I think you're going to burn energy by just trying to balance, by trying to mitigate falls, and by just trying not to slide around. So I'd say on flat terrain, take big steps, and then the steeper the slope you're going up, smaller steps. And even if you're going down like really loose, rocky scree, almost take these like fast little tippy toe steps. So it's almost not a fall, not a slide either, but just kind of a controlled run, I guess, where you're taking these faster little steps rather than having a long stride. And I think that also helps because if you have a really long stride, it's just a lot harder to balance when you're stretched all the way out there. So that's kind of my advice there. And even that probably varies quite a bit if you're hiking with poles or if you're just walking around on the trail. So that's that question of, when hiking, are there any good ways to step or walk on steep inclines? Next question we've got here is, how should you choose your hiking, camping, or hunting buddies? So we talked about choosing the campsite, but let's talk about choosing the actual people that you're going to spend your time with. I feel like most commonly how I've found really good, reliable, trustworthy hunting, camping, hiking, whatever buddies is usually friends of friends. Like a lot of times I'll find somebody who I know and trust and like hanging out with, and they'll say, hey, I've got this other buddy who's kind of into that. Maybe y'all might, I don't know, like to go do whatever, whether that's go camping, go hiking, go hunting. A lot of times friends of friends are the best way to get connected. And there are a bunch of social media groups for hunting and hiking and camping and stuff like that. But I haven't found them to be too great. I feel like those are really great forums to talk about gear or talk about basically just to tell stories, to talk about either past trips or to look for advice. If you're saying, hey, I'm going on this one new trail, has anybody hiked there? I think that's great for that sort of thing. But maybe not the best for finding somebody to go hit up a specific area and to be a consistent companion in hiking, hunting. And yeah, especially for ladies out there, be a little bit wary of those. If there's just some dude who's just out there like, yeah, let's go back in the woods and go camping. Yeah, I think to kind of stay away from that. But in general, sometimes those groups will have kind of meetups or events or group things. I think that's great. I just haven't found too many groups that do that sort of thing too often that actually turns into long-term friendships and relationships. I guess another way would be find kind of local hotspots. So if there's a trail close to you, just go out there. And if you meet somebody on the trail, stop and talk to them, because obviously it's somebody who has a lot in common with what you're doing. And you may build a friendship out of that. Or if you want to learn more about bow hunting, just go to your local archery range. Yeah, shop, buy gear, do your normal thing, but also go just to kind of hang out, because you may meet people who are coming, excuse me, just in and out of that shop, who have a lot of knowledge and wisdom, and you may find a cool new place to hunt, or maybe somebody who wants to hunt the same thing as you and wants to put in on, party tags somewhere distant, and you may be able to do that. I remember there's one guy who I'm currently on a lease with in South Texas, and he's getting off the lease, but he's a really good dude who I actually met through a drawn hunt through the state of Texas. So we were both drawn for the nilgai archery hunt down in South Texas, and we were both in a nearby, it wasn't a state park, but it was almost like a county park. It was like a campground really close to the national refuge where the nilgai hunt was taking place. And I was camped there, and so was he. And, we got to talking, like, hey, you bow hunting this thing? Yeah, cool. And when I just saw two guys who were, we're both out here with mountain bikes and camping and bow hunting these crazy devil horses in South Texas, I was like, we've immediately just got a lot in common. And we're not close friends just because we don't live that close, so we don't get to hang out that much. But he's a dude who I trust and like hunting with, and like talking to about hunting gear whenever I get a chance. So sometimes those things that you can't even plan or arrange, whether it's a drawn hunt or just a shared campsite or just somebody you run into, maybe you're just, buying a sleeping bag at Cabelas or REI or somebody, and you run into somebody close to there. And you just start talking about gear and trails and all of that. And there's just lots of opportunities to run into people who are interested in those sort of things. So that's kind of that summary on how should you choose hiking, camping, hunting buddies. Now with that, I think there's a lot of people where, I don't know how many people I've talked to who have expressed interest, and I think they're looking for somebody to guide them along. But man, you really need to look for people who are willing to at least meet you halfway. Somebody where I know I can be like, yeah, I'm going to go out of my way to help somebody and share time, share information. And man, they're going to put a lot into it and be excited and put a lot of energy. And I would just say, look for people who have that energy and people who don't complain. Because if it's people you already know are kind of whiners and complainers, you don't really want to be hiking with that person, do you? Yeah, probably not. So next question, what is overrated? Now that is kind of ambiguous. It could be applied to a lot of things. So, I guess I'm thinking about in hunting. I guess one trend that I see a little bit is those hex suits. I don't know if you guys have seen those, but it's those, they're not even scent proof suits. They're almost like an electrical shield, like a Faraday cage, and supposedly if you wear these things, animals can't detect your presence anywhere near them. I think that's definitely overrated, overhyped, and I think all like scent control products in general. Now I know some people are way different on their mindset to that. Some people will not go deer hunting without using scent control products. And I kind of used to be one. You see it on the TV shows. You see your buddy in hunting camp just spraying all this stuff on them before they go hunt. And I used to use a whole lot of those scent control products. But more and more, I'm just realizing if you play the wind right and maybe, grab some cedar on your walk in and kind of rub that on you a little bit, a lot of those scent control products are really not necessary and not even that helpful. Because I've had deer wind me and smell me when I'm using those scent control products, and obviously without. So I think playing the wind's more important. So those are definitely overrated. What else is overrated in hunting? Rage broadheads. Rage broadheads are not that good. I have just, they were all the rage in terms of just the hype and a lot of the attention they got. But in terms of performance, they have some serious issues. I'm not going to say they're bad. I know a lot of people who kill a lot of deer with them, and they work. But in terms of some of the other options out there on the market, they are definitely overrated. What's underrated is the next question. So I guess this is kind of a two-parter. So I hit the overrated, and I mostly focused on kind of hunting stuff, specifically bow hunting stuff. What's underrated? A good night's sleep. I think a lot of people see why that's important, but don't necessarily prioritize that in their camping trip. You're thinking about your gear, you're thinking about the weight you're carrying, you're thinking about all the beautiful sights you'll get to see or the animals you'll get to hunt, but you don't think about being rested to actually enjoy the trip. So a lot of times when I'm camping or hunting or just going on any adventure, melatonin or Benadryl usually in my pack, because I really value a good night's sleep, because I have just been out there on some days where I'm coming off a multi-day trip and man, you need your rest. If you're going to go hike and push hard the next day and you're doing that on very little rest and you're just toasted, it is not going to be fun. And so if you can just make yourself get a good night's sleep by popping a Benadryl or melatonin, I think it's very beneficial. What else is underrated? Man, it's such an abstract question. I'm going to change, I guess, context a little bit. We've mostly been talking about kind of hiking and camping and hunting. If we just look at fishing, I don't know why this one popped into my head, but those little crappie jigs, like those little road runners that you can go get at any tackle store for next to nothing, man, those things are seriously underrated. They cost just, sometimes you can get them for $1. Like, they're so cheap, and I've caught just about everything on them. You can catch bluegill and brim and anything like that on those crappie jigs very easily, very commonly. And you can catch bass on them. Heck, I even think I've caught catfish on them. So in terms of fishing, those things are super underrated. Next question I've got here on the list is open carry or concealed carry. Now, this could be an episode all on its own. So some of you folks, if you're not into guns like I am, maybe you ended up on this channel for some of the truck mod stuff or some of the hiking, backpacking, whatever. This isn't a gun channel. I specifically try to make it not a gun channel. Actually, originally, when I launched this channel, I called it Lefty's Guns because I'm left-handed, and so I had a lot of experience shooting guns and wanted to talk about stuff that's friendly for left-handed shooters, and I realized how much of a niche topic that was. So I opened it up to just be more about camping, hunting, hiking, all kinds of adventure. But guns, yeah, that's a part of it, because I do like shooting, both hunting, a little bit of tactical and defensive shooting, and just kind of long-range precision stuff is my newest hobby. So this refers to just the everyday carry or occasional carry even of a defensive handgun, so open or concealed. So first, I would say look at the laws in your state. If there's a definite legal benefit to one or the other, then that's the better option. There are actually a whole lot of states out there where you have to have a license to concealed carry, but not to open carry. So the license isn't to carry the gun, it's just to hide it and carry it discreetly. And I think that's kind of interesting because it's you need a permit for something that nobody, if you're doing it right, nobody would even know anyway. So it's kind of bizarre. But in those cases, if you don't want to get the permit, then the answer is obviously open carry. But ultimately, big picture, if it's legally the same, like it now is in Texas. In Texas, it used to just be concealed carry. It was the CHL that you had to have the concealed handgun license. And then they just changed it to the license to carry. So they basically removed the word concealed out of that. So it just, you have to have a license to carry a handgun, and it's kind of your choice, open or concealed. So if it's all neutral, I would say it depends on context. I know some people who say, yep, concealed's better. I don't want to show people that I'm carrying. I don't want to give away my tactical advantage, is a phrase I hear a lot. And I think that's a stupid answer. And why do I think that's a stupid answer? It's because the best tactical advantage is avoiding a fight. It's not being able to, oh, surprise, I got something. The best tactical advantage is to be able to be like, oh, I'm probably not going to attack that dude because he's packing. And I think that's a much bigger benefit than being able to surprise somebody at the end. So that's not a good argument. I would say general just kind of courtesy and politeness is another one. And that's kind of just goes in the don't spook the horses category. If it's a place where people aren't going to even notice or think anything of open carry, then yeah, absolutely open carry. If it's a place where you're going to be mildly judged or people may notice but not say anything, yeah, I think it's fine. If it's a place where it's going to really impact what you're doing, then and it's going to just cause kind of social unrest or make people really uncomfortable, I don't think that's being a good advocate and good representation of gun owners. And it's interesting because I did some work with Open Carry Texas way back in the day, and we did a lot of that. It was open carrying at all these public events, but that was also kind of a political and social demonstration. Now, I've walked around open carrying in a grocery store to a gas station. Nothing wrong with that. Now, I think if you're in a shopping mall, that might be a little bit weird. Me personally, like if I'm traveling, if I'm on a road trip, either just traveling a long distance, or maybe I'm going to pick something up on Craigslist, or maybe I'm going down to the hunting lease, yeah, I'm going to open carry. But in just everyday life, going to the grocery store, I would say concealed carry is more common for me. But I'm not going to tell anybody one route's better than the other because ultimately it's the same dude, it's the same gun, and we're talking about a dress code issue. And it's how do you prefer to wear your shirt, honestly, over your gun or under your gun? I would say it doesn't matter from that perspective. So the next question got from my buddy Mike. As a flatlander, how do you train for high altitude hiking? So I actually got to be a guest on Dr. Brooks Tiller's podcast a couple days ago. Well, I recorded it a couple days ago. It will probably be coming out shortly. And that was kind of one of the things that we talked about because we both elk hunted up in Idaho this year, and he's in Middle Tennessee and I'm in North Texas, both very flat, very low elevation places. And we kind of had to get ready to go on this high elevation elk hunt. So what did we do? How did we train? How did we prepare for it? Ultimately, I'm not an expert in this. I don't hunt at high altitudes or hike at high altitudes enough to have a specific training regimen that I can really recommend. So all I would say is push yourself harder on flat ground. If you know the hike's going to be 10 miles a day, then you better be prepared to go 15 on flat ground, just because you're building up stamina, you're building up lung capacity, and that's going to help you out a whole lot when you're up on the mountain. Now, I have seen people use those like suffocation masks, those like airway restrictive. I've never used that. I think it kind of makes sense to emulate maybe the air being thinner and you're getting less oxygen in each breath. I get the concept, but I think if I'm going to do that, if I'm going to try to restrict myself and make my lungs work harder, I'd rather do that by building stamina and just run further, carry more weight, train harder, so that I'm actually building up other things rather than just constriction. So if anybody has any tips on that, I'm totally open to learn because I do a whole lot of hunting in Texas, occasionally travel other places, but I don't spend too much time over 10,000 feet. But in terms of making the transition from about 1,000 feet here to 8, 9, 10, I would just say run, breathe, carry weight. And those things push yourself further than you know you're going to need to, and that'll just help you be that much more prepared. Next question is, how good of a shot do you have to be before you can start hunting? So do you have to be a master marksman to go out on a hunt? And I think start hunting is the key part of this. So this means this is a question from a beginner or somebody who's looking to get into it. And I think this is a question that comes from at least a perspective that could be one of intimidation, one of somebody who's, well, I want to get into hunting, but how do I have to be a perfect shot in order to get into it? I don't know. So I think ultimately one is safety. You need to be able to handle the gun safely, and you need to generally be able to hit what you're aiming at. Now, it really also depends on what type of animal you're hunting. And I think if you're getting into something like dove hunting, you can go to the clay range and practice. And for something like that, where you're wing shooting dove, quail, ducks, anything like that, the better the shot you are, the more fun you're going to have hunting. The more you're going to taste success in the field and the more you're actually going to enjoy it. But in terms of what's good enough to get you out there, man, if you can hit like at least some of the targets, then get out there and enjoy it. Just because there's so much incidental learning with hunting. Just, what gear is good, identifying the game, getting to explore new places, finding out where the game is coming from, stuff like that. Don't let that joy and that experience be held back by not being an incredible shot. Now, if you're hunting big game, I'm going to change my response a little bit, because I think when you're hunting big game, you have a much greater chance of making a bad shot and not finishing off the animal. And I think for somebody who's a beginner, you do not want to be taking your first shot with a new gun or doing a totally new experience in the field all at once. Phase it in, get comfortable, get to where you can hit a small target. Man, if the distance at which you can hit an apple is probably a good rule, because that's about the size of a deer's heart or a pig's heart. Maybe it's a little bit bigger than that, actually. So, man, if you can hit an apple, then no question, that's in range. If you're at a range where you can't hit that apple, maybe take the shot, but be more critical. And I think that's just because for a new hunter, if you go out and wound an animal, it's going to really put a sour taste, and you're going to maybe feel a little bit guilty about it, maybe feel a little bit bad about it, and it's not going to make that a positive first experience. So depends heavily on what you're hunting, but ultimately I would say don't learn to shoot while you're hunting. That can be really frustrating, and I've done it. Like, the way I was introduced to, to shooting was through hunting. So shooting was just I didn't enjoy shooting as its own hobby and then take that into a hunting application. I wanted to go hunting, and so I had to kind of know how to shoot to do that. And so there was a lot of time where I was kind of learning in the field as I was going, and it kind of is a bit frustrating. But if you can go to the range and practice your skills a little bit, you'll just be that more confident. So there's no strict answer, but hopefully that's helpful. So next question is, I guess this is very heavily related to that last one. For people looking to get into hunting, what is a good way to start or type of game to focus on? One that's really underrated is small game. Squirrels, rabbits, stuff like that. Nobody really gets into it for the cool factor, but it's very plentiful. I think there are a lot of people who want to go hunt deer or elk or geese or whatever, but a lot of these species are a lot harder to hunt, a lot harder to get on. But squirrels and rabbits, they're everywhere. So if you're looking to get into it, man, find somebody who wants to go rabbit hunting or squirrel hunting. I think my upbringing as a kid, my dad got me started way back when dove hunting, and that was a great way to get into it, honestly, because dove hunting, you don't have to be quiet. You don't have to worry about scent. You pretty much just got to worry about sitting still and kind of hitting what you're aiming at. Doves aren't too smart. They are quick, so you got to be quick. But dove hunting, man, especially if you're in the South where it's really common, and man, down here in Texas, everybody knows somebody who dove hunts. So you can probably find somebody who's going to bring you on a dove hunt and get you into it, get you excited about it. And I think that's an important part. So when you're starting, there are people who start by just getting gear and going out in the woods by themselves, but I don't think that's common. I don't think that's normal. I think normally there is somebody, a friend, buddy, father, I don't know, church member, somebody they know who kind of escorts them into the process. So what is a good way to start hunting? Find what your buddy's hunting and go with them and just glean knowledge. Learn as much as you can, be a sponge, hunt what he's hunting, and go after things that are plentiful. Doves, small game, stuff like that. Deer hunting can be fun, but I think, like I mentioned in the other question, you should know your gear. You should be a good shot before you try to shoot at a deer for the first time. And I think generally with bigger game, it's good to accompany somebody on a hunt as a non-hunter, just as an observer, just so you can learn how to walk in the woods, what to look for. You see certain things, what do they mean? Soak up that knowledge from a hunter before you're actually out there trying to make a kill on your own. So depends a little bit by the people around you and just what's available game-wise. But generally, go for something small, go for something plentiful, and go for something that's going to give you a good, positive experience rather than something hugely aspirational. So next question is, are night hikes a bad idea? So if it's in terms of a hiking trip where you're going to go hike a new trail and you want to do a loop, I would say yes. I would say the potential to get lost, to get turned around is, it's not a good idea. Now, if you're somewhere where you know the terrain, or it's a hike that is, hiking is just kind of a part of what you're doing, then I would change that answer a little bit. So if you're going deer hunting and you need to hike into an area, is it bad to hike at night? Should I wait till it's that first gray light? No, get out there as early as you can. Absolutely go at night. And I guess with that, do you need a headlamp? No. Like if it's pitch black and cloudy and you can't see anything, then bring a headlamp, preferably a red or green one, so it won't blow out your night vision. If you can see enough to get down the trail, then challenge yourself, and if you can do it safely, try to do it in the dark and hike at night to get into your stand or get into your hunting area. But if you're learning a new area in the dark, I wouldn't recommend it. I have personally gotten turned around in the dark in an area that wasn't that hard to navigate, but the fact that I had no sun to navigate by, and then it was overcast, so I didn't even have moon or stars or anything. I got turned around, and when you get turned around at night, it's a little bit freakier. You get more frustrated just because the slightest thing where you get off trail a little bit, you're like, oh, well, I just stepped off the trail. Okay, step back on, keep going. At night, that turns into, I'm off the trail. Where the heck am I? And that can be a little scary at times and definitely intimidating. So are night hikes a bad idea? Generally, yeah, but you can make it work for you if you know where you're going, what you're doing, and you're kind of mission focused. So what is the worst time to hike in regards to lightning? I think in general, spring and summer, you're going to get a lot more of these fast-moving rogue thunderstorms where lightning's unpredictable. You can get lightning kind of any time of the year, but I think spring and summer, you just get a lot more. But generally, spring and summer are also the best times to hike and get out there for some other reasons. So to that, I would say don't let lightning be a huge deterrent to the time when you go hunt or hike. I would say if you're worried about lightning, then take adequate precautions, like where do I set up my tent? Do I have good rain gear? In the case of a lightning strike, what do I do? Learn those sort of things rather than, don't be afraid of camping or hiking in the month of June because there may be thunderstorms with lightning. Now, if you're looking at a particular weekend and you just see that the weather is just awful and there's going to be lightning storms all weekend, maybe reconsider. But that would be kind of making a decision based on a known, where I think this question is, when is the worst time to hike in regards to lightning, was kind of more on an unknown, avoiding lightning. It's almost like, when should I not go to the beach to avoid sharks? I would say just don't make decisions that way. If you're in imminent danger of a shark, then you can make a different decision based on known information rather than kind of more abstract, unknown things. This next question, this is from my buddy Nate that he texted me, and this is actually a really good question. So, should game wardens have jurisdiction on private property? So you may not know this, but game wardens in most states, and I think it does vary a little bit state by state, but down here in Texas, game wardens are about the most powerful law enforcement officer there is. And they can basically bypass your right against your protection against search and seizure. So they can look in your bag. They can look at your gun, whether you want them to or not. They don't have to have a warrant. So game wardens are very powerful. And man, should they have jurisdiction on private property? I think generally I would like to see game wardens held to the same level of accountability as any other law enforcement officer. And so I think generally that should be something along the lines of, if there is a complaint, if somebody says, yep, somebody is poaching on my property, or somebody calls the game warden on somebody, then they have probable cause to go on a property. And I think there's a lot of states that basically practice it that way. The state of Texas, that's how a lot of game wardens will ultimately act, because they don't want to abuse their power and be questioned. But I don't think they actually have to have a call or a report to go on property. I think they can go sneaking around on private property. And I would generally say, I think that's unlawful. I think it's trespassing, and I think it's abusing the power of a game warden. But if somebody calls, then yeah, I think they should have the ability to do that only if there is a complaint about a game violation in particular. Now, I've noticed, and some of my other buddies have noticed, that in Texas, a lot of times the game wardens won't even bother doing that. They'll just go to the truck stops and they'll hang out there, and they'll say when people pull in to go buy a whole bunch of ice, what's that dude got in the back of his truck? Let's go talk to him. So they'll do that. And so technically they are on private property doing that. But I think that's a little bit different than like walking onto somebody's ranch or walking onto somebody's farm and looking for hunters. So in that context, I would say, yeah, they generally have the right to ask, but it's interesting. Like if a regular cop pulls you over and says, hey, can I look in your trunk? You can say, nope. And it's perfectly legal. But if a game warden says, hey, can I look in your cooler? You're held to a different standard. So I'd like to see that be normalized a little bit. Now on public land, I think I would change all that, because you're on land that's publicly owned. It's a shared asset that lots of people are using, and the power of a game warden, whether you like it or not, I think they have the power to enforce stuff on public land for sure. But private property, it should be restricted a little bit more than it is. Next one is, okay, with the current coronavirus scare, and I don't want to get into this too much because I don't want to come off as fear-mongering or like this episode's primarily about this. So this is more about prepping and emergency preparedness in general, I guess. Stuff that people aren't buying but maybe should be buying in the grocery rush. So everybody went to the stores and freaked out and bought toilet paper, which doesn't help you at all for the coronavirus. It was just a commodity that people are afraid was going to go away. So they ended up getting it. Now, what are some other things that people have been looking for and unable to get? Man, I went to the grocery store the other day just to see what was there, and I was actually surprised at how much produce was gone. I figured people were going to go for the beans and ramen noodles and those shelf-stable, generally not too healthy, but will last a long time kind of items. I figured people would go for that, and people don't like eating their veggies, so I thought those would last a little bit longer. But man, I saw the entire veggie section just wiped out. Everything from carrots to asparagus to squash, it was all gone. I think the only thing left was like sweet potatoes and jicama root. So I don't really cook with jicama too much, so I don't know a lot about that. Sweet potatoes are great. But what are things that people aren't buying that maybe we should be buying? So I'd say first off, look for different forms of the same thing. So if you go down the aisle where they keep all the regular bagged rice, it was gone. It was cleaned out. But if you go one aisle over where they have a lot of the pre-made mixes of things, guess what? They've got Cajun dirty rice. If you go to the aisle that's got all the Asian stuff, they've got like a fried rice mix. And so like you can get rice just in a slightly different form by going one aisle over. So look in different places in the grocery store for similar things. Kind of highly related to that, I saw a whole lot of people who are freaking out and panicking, wanting latex or nitrile gloves. And so people would go to maybe their local hardware store and just make a rush on them, and then there wouldn't be any in Lowe's or Walmart, and they'd be like, oh, the gloves are all gone, everybody bought them up. But I went into Harbor Freight and they had piles of them. I went and they were on sale even. Like they weren't even, not even were they, sometimes people will gouge prices and hike prices in this sort of rush. They weren't doing that. They weren't even normal price. They were trying to clear out all these things. Or if you go into a place like AutoZone, where if you look for different uses for the same type of item, guess what? Mechanics use nitrile gloves all the time, so you can generally find them there. So other items, man, a lot of people were buying a lot of that rice and ramen noodles, but a lot of the frozen food was still there. And in this crisis, and I will call it a crisis, people are scared of a virus, and I think they're scared of a bad economy, but I don't think there's any increased danger of a power outage. It's good to be prepared for that in general, but the regular stuff that you would normally buy, from fruit to a frozen pizza or anything like that, a lot of that stuff was still there. So focus first on what you normally buy. Eat what you normally eat and what you can keep eating without really interfering with your daily life. Buy that first before you get into the, Easy Mac and MREs by the case. And yeah, I think it's good to have that sort of stuff, but you don't want to plan on eating that for a week straight or a month straight, anything like that. You don't want to do it. It's good to have, but a lot of people kind of rush on some of the wrong things. And even when people were going crazy buying toilet paper, well, there were paper towels everywhere. So it's not like it was all paper supplies. I thought that was interesting. And when you look at like some of the cleaning stuff, because this is a bit of a viral scare, so hand sanitizer was, of course, gone. But you go to the next aisle over, guess what? All the soap is there. You can wash your hands with soap and freaking water, and that was all there. So just look for different forms of the same thing to solve what you're looking for. I think that's the best way I can kind of answer that question. So next interesting one is words to live by, or a code to live by, or interesting sayings. So a couple, I'm sure there's a lot of them, and I don't want to get too preachy about, words and phrases that are rules for life. There are tons of self-help books and stuff like that out there. Just some ones that stand out to me that are pretty interesting. One that came from my dad that he obviously didn't come up with, but he said, never sweat the small stuff, and usually it's all small stuff. And so I think ultimately the conclusion of that is being like, in the big picture, a lot of the details that you actually would stress about don't really matter that much. So don't get too concerned about the small stuff. Another one that also comes from my dad that I love, the 3 hardest things in life is climbing a fence leaning towards you, kissing a woman leaning away from you, and making somebody do something that they just don't want to do. And I think that's awesome, because the first 2 are kind of these very obvious dramatic examples, but then the last one, making somebody do something they just don't want to do, is spot on. I mean, I don't think there's much harder than making somebody do something they don't want to do, because I think the trick to good leadership and a positive attitude is inspiring somebody to want to do something. I can't think of anything that I can look back on and say, that was something I didn't want to do, and therefore I did it well. Ultimately, I was convinced that, long term, even if it's unpleasant, even if I don't like it, it's actually something that I do want to do. So it's making that transition from, nope, don't want to do it, to, that's something that interests me. And I think that's pretty valuable. Other words or sayings. Leaves of 3, leave it be. I have had too many bad encounters with poison ivy, so avoid that one. What should go in a bug out bag? This could be like a whole episode on its own. Again, I think the concept of a bug out bag is a bit overrated. I think there's a lot of people who watch Doomsday Preppers and see the need for a bug out bag, and we're going to bug out, we're going to get out of here. Bugging in, I would say, is generally a much better strategy. You have shelter, you have security, you have everything you generally need. If you actually have to bug out, well, things are really bad. Things are really bad. So I would say avoid that. But the idea of a go bag, a essentials bag of few limited items that would be good to have on hand. I've been working remotely a little bit this week and going into the office a little bit this week as well. So I kind of have a backpack that's kind of the work version of that. So currently I have a laptop computer, the charger, a notebook, pen, Sharpie, pocket knife, bottle of water, some Cliff Bars, a 5-hour energy, my concealed carry gun. What else do I have in there? Gum, hand sanitizer, Kleenex, and that's more for the current thing. And so I'd say about half of that generally applies to a go bag or a just emergency kind of disaster preparedness bag. Now there are some things lacking in there. If this was just a bag that I wanted to have in my truck ready to just pull out in the case of emergency at any time, I would say absolutely find a good bag. Find one that's not going to be just absolute junk and fall apart on you. Once you get a good bag, first aid kit is good. Absolutely, you need a knife. You should have spare water in there. And we could get into the details of what go into that first aid kit ad nauseum. And that's something that I'd probably rather discuss with an expert if we're going to talk about that sort of stuff. If you do concealed carry a handgun, make sure that you can fit it in that bag. Just because a lot of times you're going to want to carry on your person, not in a bag, but you may need to stash it in that bag too. So make sure it fits in there. Make sure it works. And if you're carrying on your person, an extra mag can go in that bag. So what I say, water, first aid kit, knife, flashlight, definitely a good light source, and extra batteries. And I would say those are kind of the essentials. Something like rope or paracord is also good. It can just come in handy. Zip ties are another good item. The number of times I've just fixed something in a pinch because I happen to have some zip ties rolling around in my truck, it's too many to count. It's happened a lot. So zip ties are a good item to stick in a kind of emergency go bag. A road flare is actually a good item to put in there in case you ever need to signal for help or light a fire. I'd say other fire stuff is good. Matches, tinder, but I think a lot of people get kind of hyper focused on that. They're kind of thinking about all these like disaster movies where there's a plane crash and somebody has to survive for a long time. I think that's a little bit different. That's not a very likely concept compared to what most people are going to experience. I think this is more, you break down, way far away, but you're still close to your vehicle, but you have some essentials, or you got to bail out of your vehicle in the middle of the city and you want some basic first aid, personal protection, that kind of stuff. I don't think you're going to be making a lot of fires or building a lot of shelters. I think that's a different type of adventure. So that's just some ideas. But again, the whole bug out bag or go bag could be a video all on its own. Next one is, why can't Cabelas shoppers and REI shoppers just get along? Whew, another one that could be a whole episode. So this is kind of the difference between, I guess, outdoor rec industries and what I would call sportsman's industries. And maybe the fact that I even broke it down that way, maybe that's offensive to somebody. But man, I feel like I dabble in both worlds. I love backpacking. I like camping. I like hiking. I love sailing. I don't get to do it nearly as much, but I think it's awesome. I like kayaking, but on the other side, I love fishing and I love deer hunting. And I think there's this artificial boundary between these two groups of people. One group, they're these trendy, fashionable, environmentally friendly athletes. And the other side, sometimes it's a little bit country, a little bit Bubba, but it's people who know what they like and want to be able to shoot their guns and value freedom and value eating game. But I think it's most importantly to not focus on the differences, but focus on, what do you both enjoy? And I think public land is a great example, because whether you want that land for hiking or rock climbing or kayaking, you own it and you have the same stake in ownership as the guy who wants to go out there and go rabbit hunting or coyote hunting. So public land is a great one, and just enjoying being outside in nature. And there are very few companies that really reach both of these crowds well. And I realize even right now, heck, I'm wearing a North Face shirt, but I've got deer behind me and a keep calm and carry sign behind me. And so I'm kind of like in a world between these two that's a little bit weird. In terms of who is doing this well, I feel like a lot of the ultralight gear companies, they primarily target backpackers, but then more and more, I think they're starting to realize that there are a lot of, backcountry hunters, backcountry elk hunters who really value this ultralight gear. And so, there may be an elk hunter who's rocking, a Sea to Summit cook pot or a Mountain Hardware sleeping bag, stuff like that. So I think that there's a lot of companies that don't try to pigeonhole themselves in one camp or the other and end up successful. And there's some other companies that are interesting, like Alps Outdoors. They have very split marketing campaigns for the outdoor rec industry and kind of the hunt, shoot, fish industry. Now, they mostly make tents, sleeping bags. I have a bino case and a rangefinder case from Alps. I have a sleeping pad as well. But they kind of go after those markets differently in terms of the camo patterns. And sometimes it's as simple as that. It's the same item. We put it in camo. We market it to this crowd. We get these people to endorse it and sponsor it, and it looks a little bit different. And then we have the same item in bright blue or bright orange, and that goes to the outdoor rec crowd. So it's a bit interesting there because it's like they share, but they don't. They intentionally divide themselves a little bit. So in general, I want to not focus on the division. I want to focus on how can we bring these two groups of people together over what they like. If it's being healthy, happy, and fit, I think there's great examples on both sides. Yeah, there's bad examples. I know a lot of hunters who are not athletic and overweight, and I think that's a trend that generally the hunting industry is. There are a lot of people who like hunting but don't value their personal health, and I think that's becoming less and less of the norm. There are a lot of people who like healthy food, and that's why they hunt, and I think that's really cool. But I think let's try to relate these two groups. And the next one is basic knowledge for new hunters. Man, that's so many things. It's like a lifetime of learning that you can't just throw into the end of one podcast episode. I would say, one, lean on people who are more knowledgeable than you. Be humble. I know there's a lot of times where I've gotten into a new style of hunting and I've, watched a lot of YouTube videos, read some magazine articles, and, came in a little hot-headed, thought I knew what I was doing, only to realize, wow, there are some people who really know how to do this and know a lot better. And they have experience on the ground right here, and that's more valuable than that video I watched, that article I read. So be humble, be open to learn, practice with your weapon. I think for new hunters, making hunting and shooting into two different things is okay, because being a better marksman and just kind of dorking out about getting good at that skill will make you good at hunting in terms of the shot. It'll give you more confidence there. So it's almost like if somebody is a runner, whether you train for sprint stuff or marathon stuff, just the more you improve your skill in general, the more you can be good at any specific race. So I think that's good. Learn about the game you're hunting. Learn about the animal. Learn about its habits. It'll help you to be a better hunter, better tracker, and ultimately I think it'll make you care more. You'll go into the woods not as somebody who's looking to take, but somebody who's looking to learn, somebody who's curious and is there as kind of an investigator, and you're enjoying your small part in that ecosystem and that food chain. And I would say another one is don't get discouraged. Be as optimistic as you can, because things are gonna go wrong. And guess what? That's not a reason to give up hunting. That's not a reason to stop. Sometimes, yeah, you got to bail out on a trip, but that happens. That's anything that's worthwhile generally is not easy. So have a degree of stick-to-itiveness, I guess. I'm sure that's not a word. but just to kind of slog through some of the crappy weather and some of the bad times so that the good times mean more. Experiencing those lows and getting past them will make the highs even better. So that's just some basic knowledge for new hunters. And remember why you're doing it. Either you want to put food on the table or you want to, hang a buck on the wall. Those are all cool things, but you're also going out there to just enjoy nature and have fun. So focus on that. Don't get too hung up on the goals or what you're trying to accomplish or what other people measure as success. Go in it for your own experience. Now, this is something that hikers say a lot, and I think they do a very good job of hike your own hike. Don't go for somebody else's pace and where they like to camp and how many miles they like to do in a day. That's their kind of stamina and their rules. I think if hunters kind of set the same precedent and hunt your own hunt, it'll make it a lot more enjoyable. And hunt your own hunt, but look for people who are also hunting in a way that you want to be hunting and learn from those people. So just some interesting stuff there. Now, this one, man, it was all over the place. We talked about everything from life lessons to night hikes to picking out campsites to how good of a marksman do you have to be to go hunting. It was all over the map. So if you guys enjoy this sort of thing where it's not topical and it's just dancing all around, let me know and maybe we'll do some more of these. But that's all I've got for right now. So I'll let you go back to whatever you're doing. Until next time, stay safe, be free, and never stop seeking adventure.